Hey everyone, this is Andy Melbuff, and this video is going to take a look at how we can, using Desmos Activity Builder, use checkboxes to show graphs to students based on connecting them with computation layer. And we can really do some interesting things by providing visual aids for students that will help prompt their thinking about some of those graph features. And each time we use a different checkbox selection, we can provide the students with a different visual stimulus. So let's see how this might look. So on this screen here, and I'm in preview mode in Activity Builder, you'll see several different features. You'll see a graph component right here that I'm kind of hovering over, and above that you'll see 4 equations. These are actually checkbox equations, okay? And we'll take a look at what that looks like in a moment. On the right-hand side, you'll see a note component over here. You'll see a student text box input. And below that, another note, another text box, another note, another text box. And what this looks like then, the engaging part of this is when a student chooses one of these checkbox selections, I'm going to hover over the red one. When they select the red one, you'll see a graph appear, the graph of that y equals quantity x plus 2 squared. And we can unselect that and check a different one, and we see different graphs being provided for the students. Now, if we also want them to do some compare and contrast, we can keep several of them or all of them graphed at the same time. And this can really help students in looking at what are some of the critical features of each of these graphs. Okay, they can talk about x-intercepts and y-intercepts and real solutions and things like that. So how do we go about putting this together in Activity Builder? I'm going to exit preview mode and we'll see how that gets developed. Now here I'm on a slide and I'm in edit mode here in Activity Builder. And this slide has some of those same components that we had on the previous screen. And in order to speed things up and not take a lot of time, I've already populated them with some of the information that we're going to use, and then we're going to work on connecting them with the computation layer. Now, the first thing you'll see in the upper left is we've got a checkbox component. So I'm just kind of shaking this side to side, and in that checkbox component, I have my 4 choices that we saw previously. Now, some of you are probably wondering about the color. The color comes from, and you can just leave this black and white if you wish. You don't need to have the fancy colors in there. But if you wish to have those colors, what you can do is I use Equatio, which is a free Chrome extension for teachers, to get the colors that I want, and then I basically copy and paste. So this is an example of Google Slides right here. And I've already got Equatio open at the bottom of the screen. And in my equation editor, let's say I wanted to have x plus 7, but I want it to have a certain color to it. So I can highlight it. I can change its color to, I'll just change it to orange. And then what I want to do is copy that math. So I'm down here in the lower right, and basically I want the LaTeX for it, okay, the mathematical coding for it. So I've copied this x plus 7 as LaTeX, and that should copy the orange as well. And what I'd want to do is go back into my Activity Builder, and if I wanted to add a 5th option here, I would need to have my type math, my editor box open, and I'm going to simply paste in here. And you'll see there's the x plus 7. It comes in as orange. So if you're really picky about having those different colors in there, that's how you can do that. I don't want this particular answer choice, so I'm just going to delete that particular choice. I'm labeling checkbox 3 because this is on slide 3, and I want to connect it to this graph, which I'm going to call graph 3. Now, let's go into the graph, and you'll see here are the 4 functions that I want students to see. But right away, they're all being shown at present. And I want to somehow put a condition on there that the graph only shows up when the checkbox choice is chosen. So we need to put a condition with these. So we're going to insert a condition for each of these functions or equations to be graphed. Now the way we're going to do that is assign a number. Now I'm choosing f sub 1 because this is function number 1. And I want this to be graphed when f sub 1 equals 1. Well, f sub 1, Desmos can't graph this right now. F sub 1's not defined. It doesn't know what it is. You'll see now that the red graph is gone that was originally there. If we do add a slider and I make f sub 1, 1, let me see if I can get that right there. There we go. Then the red graph is back, but any other number, it's not there. But I'm not going to use a slider. I'm instead going to define f sub 1 in the computation layer, which we'll show you in just a moment. Well, I want to do the same thing with each of these other functions. So I'm basically going to do the same thing. I'm going to type in a condition. The second function, g of x, will only get graphed when g sub 1 is 1. I'm prompted to add a slider, which I'll ignore. I'll define that in computation layer. The third graph, h sub 1, I want to be 1 as well. And the fourth graph, j sub 1, as well. So I'm prompted to add 4 sliders. Again, I'm ignoring those. I'll define each of those in computation layer. So I'm going to click done on my graph here, and you'll see nothing shows. That's because those conditions haven't been defined yet. So I'm going to go into the computation layer, and in the interest of saving a little time, I've prepared the first one already. Now this is a little tough to see, so I'm going to increase the magnification a little bit so this is a little easier to read. The number sync allows me to define f sub 1, and I'm going to define it when checkbox number 3 is the component. When checkbox number 3, option 1 is selected, f sub 1 is going to be the number 1. That's how this part is read. When checkbox 3's component has option number 1 selected, f sub 1 will be 1. Otherwise, it'll be 0. But I need that also. I need that number definition for each of my others. So the easiest way I found to do this is to just copy and paste. Now when I paste, I get error message right away. Duplicate definition. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and paste 2 more times. And then I'm just going to make some small adjustments. Well, I don't want duplicates. I want to define g sub 1, and then I want to define h sub 1, and then I want to define j sub 1. So now my duplicate definitions are gone, but I also have another small adjustment. I want g sub 1 to be based on checkbox option number 2. So I'm going to change this to a 2. I'm going to change this to a 3. So this becomes 1 when checkbox number 3 is selected and when checkbox number 4 is selected. So now these 4 numbers, f sub 1, g sub 1, h sub 1, j sub 1, are all ready to go. The last thing I have here is I have viewing window restrictions or bounds. The bounds sync allows me to choose what the student's viewing window is. So this part I'm highlighting indicates that the x values on the graph are going to go from -6 to 6, and the y values from -10 to 10. So let me click done, and let's see preview for a moment. Let me go back to my regular viewing here. Now, when the student chooses the red gets graphed. When they choose the blue gets graphed, etc. But you'll notice something else is missing. Some of the initial text prompting that I had given the students before is missing. Let me show you what that should look like. We want the students to be prompted. So how do we put that prompting in there? We do it in the text box using something called initial text. Let me blow this back up again. Initial text is a sync that allows the teacher to prompt students with what they want them to see. So this part right here is what will show up. And ideally, then, the students are going to type after that what they notice the critical features are. Now, this may look a little confusing right here. This is the LaTeX. To make the word red, have a text color of red. This is the LaTeX to make the word blue, have a text color of blue, etc. If you don't want to be that fancy, you don't need to put any of that in there. You could just say the red graph are, etc. Red graph is, etc. So let me Go back here. Also, here's some more initial text. And here's some more initial text that puts in their prompts for the students. Some similarities are, some differences are. So let's see this whole thing in preview mode now. Here's the initial text that we just looked at, and the colors come out there. Here's the initial text prompt. Some similarities are. Here's the initial text prompt. Some differences are. So the students then can, through selecting different checkboxes, notice some of the critical features of the red graph, the blue graph, etc., and they can compare and contrast. They can describe here what some similarities in the graphs are, what some differences in the graphs are. And so in this manner, we can use these different checkbox options to prompt student thinking and give them some visual stimulus to look at.